They say your life can change in a single moment. For me, it wasn't a bang or a scream or a crash. It was the soft, blinking red light on my computer screen, pulsing like a dying star in the twilight of my corner office. Unauthorized transaction detected. The alert was sterile, a simple piece of automated security. But in the pit of my stomach, a glacier began to form. The Manhattan skyline sprawled before me, a tapestry of ambition and glittering lies, but my entire world had shrunk to that 12-inch display. My name is Isabella "Izzy" Thorne. By title, I am the Chief Strategy Officer of Thorne Global, the legacy empire my grandfather built from the ground up. By blood, I am its heir. By heart, I was, until that moment, Alistair Grant's devoted fiancé. I clicked the alert. The financial report opened, a spreadsheet of numbers that usually spoke of profit and loss. Tonight they whispered of betrayal. 3 payments. All within the last 4 months. All funneled through a subsidiary account labeled Strategic Outreach and Client Development. Each one a neat, unassuming $4,500. It wasn't the amount that stole the air from my lungs. It was the beneficiary. Chloe Summers. Alistair's executive assistant. My fiancé's bright, young, perpetually smiling assistant. My hand, the one adorned with a flawless emerald-cut diamond set in rose gold, froze over the trackpad. I'd always thought the ring was a promise. A beacon of a shared future. Now it felt like a shackle, its weight suddenly unbearable. Alistair and I had been engaged for 10 months. Before that, we were together for 4 years. He was the rising star, the charismatic outsider who charmed my father and dazzled the board. He had a way of making you feel like you were the only person in the room, a skill honed in the halls of power. I had defended him against the whispers, the ones that said he was an opportunist, that he loved the company more than he loved me. I was such a fool. I dug deeper, pulling up the attached receipts. They weren't for business lunches or corporate gifts. A statement from a boutique jeweler for a tennis bracelet. A booking at the Reverie, a notoriously intimate boutique hotel. A final, damning receipt from an exclusive French restaurant, dated for 2 nights ago, the night Alistair had told me he was stuck in a last-minute conference call with our Asian investors. The pieces clicked into place with the cold, final sound of a cell door locking. The bracelet was a twin to the one I'd seen on Chloe at the last charity gala. The one she'd nervously tucked under her sleeve, claiming it was a cheap replica. It wasn't subtle. It was a slap in the face, delivered with the arrogant assumption that I would never look. I didn't scream. I didn't throw my monitor through the glass wall. A strange, serene calm settled over me. This was no longer a matter of the heart. This was a breach of contract. A hostile takeover of my life. I stood, my movements precise and economical. I walked to the window and closed the blinds, shutting out the city's judging eyes. Then I returned to my desk and opened a new email. To Robert Thorne, Dad. Subject: resignation. Body: effective immediately, I am stepping down from my role as Chief Strategy Officer and from all related duties at Thorne Global. I will be in touch regarding my future plans. Please do not contact me tonight. Isabella. I CC'd the entire board, legal, and our head of PR. Then I looked at my left hand. The ring, which had once felt like a part of me, was now a foreign object. I twisted it off, the metal cold against my skin. It came away easily, as if it had been waiting for this moment. I dropped it into a small velvet box I kept in my desk for paperclips. The lid closed with a soft, definitive click. I didn't call Alistair. I didn't text him. There were no words left that he deserved to hear. I arrived at our penthouse in Tribeca just after 9. The lights were on, casting a warm, deceptive glow. He was home. Alistair was on the sofa, a half-empty glass of red wine in his hand, his tie loosened and shirt sleeves rolled up. He looked the picture of casual, exhausted success. He looked up as I entered, and that practiced, charming smile, the one that used to make my heart stutter, spread across his face. "There you are," he said, his voice a warm baritone. I was starting to worry. "You missed dinner." I had Stefano's deliver. I didn't respond. I simply held up the velvet box. His smile faltered. "Izzy? What's that?" "Consider it a return on a faulty investment," I said, my voice eerily steady. He stood, the casual posture evaporating into sudden tension. "What are you talking about?" "The payments, Alistair. To Chloe. The hotels. The bracelet. the dinner at La Perle 2 nights ago. I listed them off like I was reading from a quarterly report. It's all there. Quite the discretionary fund. The color drained from his face. Hey, wait. Just, let me explain. It's not what you think. Really? I let out a soft, breathy laugh that held no humor. Enlighten me. What is it then? It was a mistake. A moment of weakness. The pressure of the merger, the board breathing down my neck. He ran a hand through his perfectly styled hair. It meant nothing. You're blaming the merger? I asked, my voice dangerously quiet. I'll fire her, he said quickly, taking a step toward me. Tomorrow morning she's gone. You don't need to. Why not? Because I already resigned. From the company. And from you. He stared at me as if I'd started speaking in tongues. You're joking. Izzy, this is our life. You can't just. I stepped forward and placed the velvet box on the coffee table between us, right on top of the financial journal he'd been pretending to read. I hope she was worth it, Alistair. I truly do. Then I turned and walked away, leaving him standing in the ruins of the life we'd built. I didn't go back to the penthouse that night. I checked into a quiet, anonymous hotel on the Upper East Side and sat by the window, watching the city until the sun bled over the skyline. I thought of my mother, a woman who had traded her own brilliance for a life in my father's shadow. She told me once, her voice laced with a sadness I was too young to understand, some men will build you a palace just to watch you live in a single room. They'll hand you the world and then get angry when you want to explore it. Alistair hadn't just put me in a room. He'd mortgaged the palace to pay for a fling with the help. But he had made one fatal miscalculation. He thought because I left quietly I left empty-handed. He had no idea what I was taking with me. The silence in the hotel room was a physical presence. It was 3 days after the discovery and I had let the chaos breathe. Let Alistair sweat. Let the board whisper. My resignation email had been a stone dropped into a still pond, and now I was watching the ripples from a safe distance. My phone had blown up, of course. First my father, his calls moving from confused to concerned to furious. Then board members, their messages a mix of placation and panic. Alistair had called 17 times. I'd listened to the first voicemail. Isabella, please. We need to talk. This is insane. You're throwing everything away over a misunderstanding. His voice was strained, a poor performance of contrite confusion. I deleted it and blocked his number. He didn't love me. He loved the idea of me. The key to the kingdom. And now that key had broken off in the lock. It was time to make my first real move. Revenge wasn't about screaming in his face. It was about dismantling his life brick by brick, and using those bricks to build something better for myself. And for that I needed a very specific kind of ally. I needed the one person Alistair feared more than anyone. Lucas Kane. Lucas was the founder and CEO of Kane Ventures, a rival private equity firm known for its ruthless efficiency and even more ruthless leader. We had a history, Lucas and I. We'd been rivals from the moment I joined Thorn Global, clashing in boardrooms over acquisitions, trading barbs at charity galas. There was a razor-sharp intellect behind his cool gray eyes, and a simmering tension between us that had once, years ago, nearly boiled over in an elevator after a particularly contentious meeting. We'd stood there, inches apart, the air crackling with something that felt like hatred and desire all at once. We'd both pulled back, deciding we were better as adversaries than allies. Now I needed to change that calculus. I sent a single text to a number I hadn't used in years. Me, the Vault. Noon tomorrow. The Vault was a speakeasy-style cafe downtown, a place where deals were made and unmade away from prying eyes. He replied 10 minutes later. Lucas, I thought you'd retired. Kane. I arrived 5 minutes early, wearing a simple but severe black sheath dress and sunglasses that hid my eyes. He was already there, seated in a secluded leather booth in the back, a double espresso untouched in front of him. He looked exactly the same, maybe even more dangerous. Charcoal suit, no tie, a watch that cost more than most cars. He didn't stand as I approached. Isabella Thorne, he said, his voice a low rumble. Or is it still Grant? It's Thorne, I said, sliding into the booth opposite him. It always was. He smirked, a faint, knowing curl of his lips. I heard you left the building in a blaze of glory. Or was it a whimper? It was a resignation email. The glory comes later. He leaned back, assessing me. So this isn't a social call. Are we finally playing chess? We've always been playing chess, Lucas. You just didn't realize I was the one moving the pieces on both boards. That got his attention. His smirk faded, replaced by a look of genuine interest. Go on. I'm taking Thorn Global back. He blinked, then let out a short, sharp laugh. You resigned. I unresigned. Or rather, I'm repositioning. Alistair is a cancer. I'm the cure. I opened my leather folio and slid a file across the table. It wasn't the emotional evidence of his affair. It was colder, harder. The financial records of the misappropriated funds. A detailed analysis of his recent reckless business decisions that had weakened our stock. A map of the board members, color-coded by loyalty and leverage. I need your vote at the next shareholder meeting. And I need your silence until then. He opened the file, his eyes scanning the pages with rapid efficiency. He let out a low whistle. You're not just kicking him out. You're burying him. He dug the grave. I'm just making sure he lies in it. He tapped the file. This is a declaration of war. It will make headlines. It will tank the stock before it recovers. I know. I'll be there to buy it at the dip. He looked up, his gray eyes locking with mine. And what do I get out of this act of corporate regicide? I held his gaze, my pulse steady. This was the moment. The gamble. You get me, I said, my voice barely a whisper. As a partner. Not at Thorn Global. A new entity. A merger. Thorn's legacy infrastructure and client list, with Kane's aggressive capital and global reach. We'd be unstoppable. A long, heavy silence stretched between us. I could see the calculations spinning behind his eyes. The business opportunity was a once-in-a-lifetime offer. But there was more. There was always more with us. He leaned forward, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial murmur. The last time we tried to be in a room together, we almost tore each other's clothes off. This is different. Is it? He reached across the table, his fingers brushing against mine. A jolt, electric and undeniable, shot up my arm. Or is this just the most elaborate foreplay you've ever orchestrated? I didn't pull my hand away. Don't flatter yourself. This is business. He smiled, a real predatory smile this time. Then don't hold back this time, Isabella. I want the real you. The one he was too stupid to see. Then you'll have her, I said. Do we have a deal? He looked at my hand, then back at my eyes. We have a deal. Alistair, in a stunning display of either profound denial or tactical stupidity, hadn't cancelled the engagement party. It was scheduled for that Saturday night at the Grand Oak, a venue dripping with old money opulence. He must have believed I would come to my senses. That this was a tantrum I would get over. Or perhaps he thought showing a united front was the only way to salvage his crumbling reputation. He was about to learn the depth of his error. Lucas thought it was a reckless move. Why give him the spotlight? He'd asked over the phone. Because the higher they are, the harder they fall, I'd replied, staring at the black couture gown hanging on my hotel closet door. I'm not going to deny him the spotlight. I'm just going to make sure it burns him. The plan was simple. I would make an appearance. I would make a scene. But not the kind of scene anyone expected. No screaming, no crying. I would be ice, not fire. And my words would be the scalpel that severed his jugular in front of everyone who mattered. Lucas would be waiting outside with a car. The second act would begin the moment I left the ballroom. I arrived exactly 45 minutes after the party had started. The ballroom was a sea of champagne flutes and forced laughter. I could feel the tension the moment I stepped through the doors. The chatter died down to a hushed murmur as I made my way through the crowd. I wore the black dress. It was backless, sleeveless, and cut with a brutalist elegance that screamed power, not celebration. I wore my hair down, my makeup sharp, and no jewelry except for a pair of diamond studs. The absence of the emerald-cut ring on my left hand was a louder statement than any accessory could ever be. I saw my father first. His face was a mask of pained confusion. I gave him a small, almost imperceptible nod. Trust me. Then I saw Alistair. He was near the center of the room holding court with a group of investors. He was wearing the tuxedo I'd helped him pick out, his smile looking strained at the edges. When his eyes met mine, the smile vanished, replaced by pure, unadulterated panic. He excused himself and cut through the crowd towards me, his steps hurried. Isabella, he hissed, grabbing my elbow. What are you doing here? I gently but firmly removed his hand. I was invited. Or did you forget you were throwing a party for us? Don't do this, he pleaded, his voice low. We can talk about this. Privately. Oh, I think we're past privacy, don't you? I said, my voice carrying just enough to make the people nearest us lean in. I didn't wait for his response. I walked to the small bandstand and picked up a microphone. The band, confused, stopped playing. The room fell utterly silent. Every eye was on me. Good evening, I said, my voice calm and clear, amplified through the speakers. Thank you all for coming tonight to celebrate what was supposed to be the happiest time of my life. A nervous titter ran through the crowd. I'd like to propose a toast, I continued, raising a glass of champagne a waiter had hastily provided. I turned my gaze to Alistair, who stood frozen, his face ashen. To Alistair Grant. A man so profoundly dedicated to his work, so committed to client relations, that he redefines the meaning of overtime. The silence was now deafening. You could have heard a pin drop on velvet. I regret to inform you all that the engagement is off, I announced, not a trace of emotion in my voice. It seems the groom's tastes have diversified. And while I wish him and his new assistant all the best, I will not be a part of their collaborative efforts. Gasps erupted. Heads swiveled, looking for Chloe. I saw her near the bar, her hand flying to her mouth, her face a perfect mask of horror. Alistair started toward me. That's enough, Isabella. Is it? I asked into the microphone, my eyes never leaving his. I don't think it's nearly enough. But don't worry. The board has all the financial records. I'm sure they'll find your discretionary spending just as creative as I did. I placed the microphone back on the stand, the feedback whining through the room. I didn't look back. I walked through the parted crowd, my head high, the black dress a slash of finality through the pastel-colored party. I didn't run. I walked, each step a nail in the coffin of my old life. Lucas was indeed waiting outside, leaning against a black town car, a wicked smirk on his face. He opened the door for me. God, I've missed watching you work, he said, his voice thick with admiration. I slid into the car, the adrenaline finally starting to course through my veins, making my hands tremble slightly. That wasn't work, I said, looking out the window as the grand oak shrank behind us. That was the opening act. The first rule of elegant revenge is to let your enemy believe you're finished. Let them think you've had your moment, screamed your piece and slunk away. Alistair would now think my public humiliation was my final move. He would believe I was spent, emotional and ultimately harmless. He would be wrong. As the car merged into the nighttime traffic, I felt a strange sense of peace. The ghost of the woman I had been, the one who believed in the ring, the shared future, the fairy tale, was finally laid to rest. In her place was someone harder, sharper, and infinitely more dangerous. I was no longer Alistair's jilted fiancée. I was Isabella Thorne, and I was just getting started. The fallout from the party was immediate and brutal. The society pages and business blogs had a field day. Thorne heiress torches engagement in spectacular fashion. One headline read. Grant's discretionary spending under scrutiny, blared another. I ignored it all. While Alistair was scrambling, issuing weak statements about private matters and personal misunderstandings, I was in the war room Lucas had set up in his company's headquarters. It was a sleek, minimalist space with floor-to-ceiling screens displaying real-time stock tickers and ownership charts of Thorne Global. Our plan was simple in objective, complex in execution. We were going to stage a hostile takeover, but from the inside. Using my knowledge of the company's vulnerabilities and Lucas's financial firepower, we would convince the shareholders to oust Alistair and install me as CEO. It was a gamble. I was betting on my legacy, my track record, and the deep-seated loyalty many of the old guard board members still held for my family name. For a week we worked in a focused frenzy. I made calls, my voice steady and confident, reminding key players of the stability I represented. I didn't badmouth Alistair. I simply presented the cold, hard numbers of his mismanagement. I was the cure, just as I'd told Lucas. I was so engrossed in the chess match that I was caught off guard when the pawn decided to make a move of its own. Lucas's assistant buzzed my private line. Miss Thorne? There's a Haley Summers here to see you. She says it's urgent. Chloe. She was using her real first name. A pathetic attempt at gravitas. I almost told his assistant to send her away. But curiosity and a desire to look my replacement in the eye one last time won out. "Send her in," I said, closing the financial model I was working on. Chloe Haley walked in, trying to project a wounded dignity. She was dressed in a conservative beige coat, her hair pulled back, a far cry from the glamorous party girl from the engagement party. The bravado was a thin veneer over sheer panic. "I just want to talk," she said, her voice trembling slightly. I didn't offer her a seat. I leaned back in my chair, steepling my fingers. "You have 5 minutes." She swallowed, her eyes darting around the powerful room. I didn't know he was still so serious about you." I let the absurdity of that statement hang in the air for a moment. "Yet you slept with him anyway." "It wasn't about him," she blurted out, her cheeks flushing. "Not really." That gave me pause. "Excuse me. I thought being with him was the fastest way up," she admitted, her voice dropping to a whisper. "He promised me things. A promotion. A seat at the table. He said I'd be the CFO's special advisor. I thought I'd finally be safe." Safe. The word echoed in the sterile room. It was such a raw, unexpected admission. Not that she was in love. Not that she was adored. That she wanted security. For a fleeting second I saw not a villain, but a naive girl who'd believed the lies of a powerful man. The sympathy was brief, snuffed out by the memory of her wearing the bracelet I'd paid for with my heartbreak. "You made your bet, Haley," I said, my voice flat and unforgiving. "Now you get to lie in it." Her eyes welled with tears, but I saw the calculation in them. She was searching for a lever, any lever. She found one. "I'm pregnant," she whispered. The air left the room. My carefully constructed composure, the wall of ice I had built around myself, didn't crack, but I felt a deep internal shudder. I'd trained for years to hide every tells, but this was a blow I hadn't anticipated. I didn't gasp. I didn't flinch. I simply went perfectly still, my eyes locked on hers. She mistook my silence for weakness. "Alistair doesn't know yet," she continued, her voice gaining a pleading tone. "But if you destroy him now, if you take the company, I have nothing. The baby has nothing." The spell was broken. The manipulation was too transparent, too desperate. Any pity I might have felt evaporated. I stood up slowly, the movement deliberate and controlled. I walked around the desk until I was standing directly in front of her. "Let me be very clear," I said, my voice low and dangerously calm. "If you think playing the victim will make me pull back, you have profoundly misjudged me. I don't pity women who weaponize their own poor choices. And I certainly don't reward betrayal. Isabella, please." "No," I cut her off, my final word on the matter. "You wanted security? Here's some free advice. Start looking for a good child support lawyer. And a new job." I walked to the door and held it open. She stared at me, the tears now flowing freely, but they had no power here. After a long moment she shuffled out, the picture of defeated shame. I closed the door and leaned against it, closing my eyes. The encounter had shaken me, but not in the way she'd hoped. It had solidified my resolve. This wasn't just about me anymore. It was about cleaning out a nest of vipers. Alistair created this mess. The emotional one, the financial one, and now the human one. He didn't deserve to be in charge of a company, let alone a family. I walked back to my desk and picked up my phone. I had a new target now. It was no longer enough to take the company. I had to make sure that when I did, there was nothing left for Alistair to salvage. Not his career, not his reputation, and certainly not his future. The game had just gotten more personal. The day of the special shareholder meeting dawned gray and heavy with rain. It felt appropriate. The boardroom at Thorn Global was chilled, the air thick with a tension you could taste, a metallic mix of ambition and fear. I walked in alone, dressed in a sharp dove-gray power suit. I carried no notes. The plan was etched into my mind. Lucas was already there, representing his newly acquired stake in the company. He gave me a slight, almost imperceptible nod from across the room. "Ready." Alistair was at the head of the long mahogany table, trying to project an aura of unshakable control. He was freshly shaven, wearing his most confident captain of industry expression. But I could see the tightness around his eyes, the slight tremor in his hand as he reached for his water glass. He was terrified. The room filled with the board members, their lawyers, and key shareholders. I took a seat midway down the table, a deliberate choice. I wasn't challenging his position at the head. I was making it clear I was just one of the players for now. My father was there, his face unreadable. He had kept his distance since my resignation, but he hadn't publicly supported Alistair either. I was counting on his silent loyalty, not to me as his daughter, but to the company his father built. The chairman, an old-school titan named Walter Pierce, called the meeting to order. Before we begin the vote on the motion to appoint a new chief executive, Alistair began, his voice too loud, too forceful, I'd like to remind everyone of our record profits this past quarter. The growth under my leadership is undeniable. Nobody is denying your profit report, Alistair, Lucas interrupted, his voice a lazy drawl that cut through the room. This vote is about fiduciary integrity and a fundamental breach of trust. Alistair's composure cracked. This is an internal matter, Rhodes. You're an outsider. I'm a major shareholder, Lucas countered, leaning forward. That makes the rot inside this company my business. A murmur rippled through the room. Walter Pierce tapped his gavel. The floor is for the motion. All in favor of appointing Isabella Thorne as interim CEO, please signify by raising your hand. My heart was a drum in my chest, but my face was a placid mask. I kept my hands folded on the table. I would not vote for myself. I watched the hands. My father's hand went up first, steady and sure. A wave of relief so powerful it nearly buckled my knees washed over me. Lucas's hand, of course. Walter Pierce, after a long assessing look at Alistair, slowly raised his. Then one by one, others followed. The grizzled old man from the acquisitions team who always napped during meetings. The head of HR whom Alistair had tried to force into early retirement. The representative from the Union Pension Fund, whom I'd personally assured of my commitment to the workforce. It was a wave, a silent, inexorable tide turning against him. When the final hand rose, the count was decisive. Walter's voice was grim. The motion is passed. Isabella Thorne is hereby appointed interim chief executive officer of Thorne Global, effective immediately. The room was utterly silent. All eyes turned to me. I stood smoothing my jacket. I looked at Alistair, who was staring at the table, his face a ghastly white. You are welcome to stay, Alistair, I said, my voice ringing clear in the quiet room. In an advisory capacity. But as of this moment, you are relieved of all executive authority and decision-making power. He didn't look at me. He shoved his chair back, the legs screeching against the polished floor, and stormed out of the room without a word. The door slammed shut behind him, the sound echoing like a gunshot. The silence held for a moment longer, and then the room erupted into a cacophony of voices, some congratulating me, others already asking about the transition. I didn't hear them. I walked to the head of the table, to the chair Alistair had just vacated. I didn't sit. I simply placed my hands on the back of it, feeling the cool leather beneath my palms. It was done. Later, after the crowd had dispersed and the lawyers had descended to handle the paperwork, I found myself back in my old office. My office. It looked the same, but it felt entirely different. The air was mine. The view was mine. The future was mine. Lucas found me there, standing by the window, watching the rain streak down the glass. You did it, he said simply from the doorway. I didn't turn. We did it. He walked in and came to stand beside me. What now? Now. I finally looked at him, a slow, determined smile touching my lips. Now I fix everything he broke. He studied my face, his gray eyes searching. You didn't have to do it this way. I could have handled him for you. But then I wouldn't have learned how far I could go on my own, I replied. A long, heavy pause stretched between us. The professional tension of the day was giving way to something else, something that had been simmering for years. Then softer he asked, Do you still love him? No. The answer was immediate, absolute. There was not a single shred of that woman left in me. But I did once, I admitted, turning to fully face him. And that's what makes me so dangerous now. He didn't smile. He just looked at me with an intensity that stole my breath. Good. In that single word I heard everything. He wasn't afraid of my power. He wasn't intimidated by my victory. He was turned on by it. He was the only man who had ever looked at the storm inside me and not tried to calm the waters, but asked to sail with me. The war for the company was over. But as I looked at Lucas Kane, I had a feeling, a different kind of battle, and a different kind of surrender, was just beginning. Power isn't seized in a single dramatic vote. It's consolidated in the quiet, methodical days that follow. The morning after I was named CEO, the real work began. The headlines were brutal for Alistair, just as we knew they would be. The narrative had solidified. He was the reckless, philandering fool who nearly tanked a legacy. I was the brilliant, wronged heiress who saved her birthright. I was careful not to feed the story, giving only a single bland statement about looking forward and stabilizing the company's vision. Inside Thorn Global, I moved with a surgeon's precision. My first week was a masterclass in corporate restructuring. I fired Alistair's inner circle, the sycophants and yes-men he'd installed in key positions. I did it personally behind closed doors with a cold professionalism that left no room for argument. They had backed the wrong horse, and in this world that was a capital offense. I reinstated Liz Chin, our former legal VP, a brilliant woman Alistair had forced out because she asked too many questions. I gave her full autonomy and a mandate to clean house in the legal department. Her loyalty was instant and fierce. I closed 2 underperforming European branches that Alistair had kept open for vanity's sake, redirecting the capital to bolster our stronger divisions. And I implemented a profit-sharing model for our entry-level employees. The email I sent to the entire company was short and direct. Your hard work built this company. It's time you shared in its success. It wasn't just good ethics, it was brilliant strategy. The morale boost was instantaneous, creating a groundswell of loyalty that no boardroom vote could ever guarantee. I was not there to be their savior. I was there to be their CEO. And I expected results. A few days into my new reign, a delivery arrived at my office. No note. Just a long, slender black box. Inside, resting on a bed of black velvet, was a Mont Blanc pen, its platinum finish gleaming. It was sleek, weighty, and devastatingly elegant. A tool for signing contracts, not love letters. I didn't need a card to know who sent it. Only one man understood that the most romantic gesture he could offer me was a weapon for my arsenal. I texted him later that evening. Me, the pen is mightier than the sword. A classic choice. Lucas, I've always preferred signing contracts to duels. Less mess. Me, depends on the contract. Lucas, come to Paris with me. I stared at the text. Paris. It was impulsive, reckless, and completely at odds with the image of the controlled, disciplined CEO I was projecting to the world. Me. Is this a business trip? Lucas, it's a trip. The business is your sanity. 72 hours. Something in me, a tightly wound cord of tension that had been pulled taut since the moment I saw that red warning light, suddenly slackened. Me, send the details. We didn't tell anyone. It was a clean break, a vanishing act. For the first time in a year I turned off my work phone. The silence was unnerving then blissful. The suite he'd booked overlooked the Seine. It was all old-world grandeur and modern luxury, a perfect reflection of the man himself. He didn't try to fill the space with chatter. He just let me be. We walked along the river, ate croissants at a tiny cafe, and visited a museum, not saying a word for hours. It was in the quiet that I realized how loud my life had been. The constant hum of betrayal, the screech of revenge, the deafening roar of having to prove myself. That night we stood on the balcony, the Eiffel Tower glittering in the distance. A light rain began to fall, misting the air around us. I don't know how to do this, I admitted softly, the words torn from a place of deep vulnerability I rarely visited. Do what? He asked, his voice gentle. Be still. I've been fighting for so long I don't remember what peace feels like. He turned to me, his face illuminated by the city's glow. Then don't be still. Just be with me. The fight's over, Isabella. You won. Tears I didn't know I was capable of anymore pricked at my eyes. I turned my face into the rain to hide them. His hand found mine, his fingers lacing through mine, solid and sure. I never thanked you, I whispered. For what? For not trying to save me. For just standing beside me while I saved myself. He lifted my chin, his gray eyes serious. Letting you save yourself was the hardest damn thing I've ever done. I wanted to tear his throat out for you. But I knew you needed to be the one to wield the knife. And in that moment the last of my defenses crumbled. I leaned in and kissed him. It wasn't like the frantic, desperate kiss in his office. This was slow, deep, and full of a terrifying promise. It was a kiss that felt less like a beginning and more like a homecoming. Back in New York, the world had kept turning. The company was still standing stronger for my absence. The time away had been a test and we had all passed. Lucas and I didn't define what we were. There were no late-night conversations about labels or futures. We just were. He was a constant, steady presence. Some nights he'd be at my condo with takeout when I got home from a late meeting. Other nights, we'd just work in comfortable silence in our respective offices, connected by a shared, unspoken understanding. One evening, as we were reviewing a merger proposal from his board, he looked up at me. "They want to make it official," he said. "A full merger. Thorn Global and Kane Ventures." I went still. This was the big leagues. This was forever. "What do you want?" I asked, my voice carefully neutral. He stood and walked around the desk, taking the proposal from my hands and dropping it back on the pile. "I want you," he said simply. "The company is just the box it comes in." He knelt in front of my chair, a gesture so unlike him it stole my breath. "But if we do this, we do it with a prenup. A corporate prenup. Your company stays yours no matter what happens between us. I'm not Alistair. I don't want what's yours. I just want you beside me." I looked at this powerful, dangerous man on his knees, not in supplication but in offering. He was handing me a fortress and asking for a single room in return. I placed my hand on his cheek. "Draw up the papers." The rebuild was complete. I had not only reclaimed my company, I had for the first time built a foundation for a life that was truly wholly my own. They say the past is never really dead. It doesn't even stay buried. For me, it walked back into my life on a Tuesday afternoon, smelling of Chanel No. 5 and quiet desperation. Liz Chin appeared in my office doorway, her expression unreadable. "You have a visitor." "I'm booked solid," I said, not looking up from the supply chain report. "I know. But it's Eleanor Grant." My pen stilled. Alistair's mother. The woman who had once fussed over wedding china with me, her eyes full of a future that was now ash. I felt a cold trickle of dread, but also a surge of defiant anger. What could she possibly want? "Send her in," I said, my voice flat. Eleanor Grant swept in, a vision of maintained elegance in a dove-gray suit, her pearls perfect, her smile strained. But her eyes, the same shade of blue as her son's, were red-rimmed and haunted. "Isabella," she began, her voice trembling with the effort to maintain decorum. "You look, well." "Thank you, Eleanor. To what do I owe the pleasure?" I didn't offer her a seat. She clasped her hands tightly, her knuckles white. "I've come to ask you, to beg you really, to stop this." "Stop what exactly?" "All of it." The words burst out of her, a small, contained explosion. "The media, the whispers. You've made your point. You've taken everything from him. He's broken, Isabella. He doesn't eat. He doesn't sleep. He just exists. Is that not enough for you?" The coldness inside me spread. I stood up, needing the height, the power of position. "Has he lost everything?" I asked, my voice dangerously quiet. "Because I lost 5 years. I lost my voice in my own company. I lost the future I was sold. You didn't come to beg him to stop when he had everything and I had his lies." Tears spilled down her carefully powdered cheeks. "I know what he did was wrong. Unforgivable. But you loved him once. Can't you find it in your heart to show a little mercy?" I walked around the desk until I was standing directly in front of her, close enough to see the fine cracks in her composure. "I did love him once," I said, each word a shard of ice. "And for that reason and that reason alone I am showing mercy. Because if I weren't, you wouldn't be standing in my office asking for it. You'd be visiting him in a federal penitentiary for embezzlement." She flinched as if I'd struck her. All the fight went out of her, leaving behind a hollow, grieving mother. She nodded once, turned and walked out, a ghost leaving the scene of the crime. I stood there for a long time, the silence in the office roaring in my ears. I didn't feel victorious. I felt clean. I had drawn a line in the sand and refused to let the past cross it. That night I found myself at Lucas's penthouse. I hadn't called, I just showed up. He opened the door, took one look at my face and pulled me inside without a word. He led me to the balcony overlooking the city, handed me a glass of whiskey and waited. "His mother came to see me today," I finally said, the words tasting bitter. "I heard," he replied. His network of information was formidable. Did I become the villain? I asked, the question surprising me as much as it did him. It was a crack in my armor, a moment of profound doubt I would never show to anyone else. He turned to me, his expression fierce. No. You became the consequence. There's a world of difference. He took the glass from my hand and set it down, his hands framing my face. You don't owe anyone your pain, Isabella. Not even to make them feel better about their own. He kissed me then, and it was different from the kiss in Paris. That one had been about promise. This one was about absolution. It was fierce and possessive, a reclaiming. His hands slid from my face down my back, pulling me flush against him. I told myself I'd go slow with you, he murmured against my lips, his voice rough. That you needed space. Time. His mouth moved to my jaw, my neck, each kiss a brand. But every time I see you hold the world on your shoulders and refuse to bend. He nipped at my earlobe, making me gasp. I want to be the one who reminds you how to feel. He walked me backward into the living room, his eyes dark with a hunger that mirrored my own. This wasn't about comfort. It was about combustion. Later, tangled in his sheets with the city lights painting patterns on our skin, I finally exhaled. The ghost of Eleanor Grant, of Alastair, of the woman I used to be, had been banished. In their place was the solid, undeniable reality of the man sleeping beside me, and the fierce, unbreakable woman I had become. The past could knock on my door all it wanted. It didn't mean I had to let it in. I didn't wear white. White was for blank slates, for virginal beginnings. My story was not a blank slate. It was written in the ink of betrayal, the blood of battle, and the gold of hard-won victory. So I wore gold. The dress was a column of heavy, liquid silk, backless, with a high neck and a slit that promised both elegance and danger. It was the armor of a queen, not the gown of a bride. My hair was swept into a sleek chignon, and my only jewelry was a single teardrop diamond pendant Lucas had given me the night before. Something new, he'd said, his voice gruff. The ceremony was held at Lucas's estate in the Hudson Valley. It was modern and severe, all glass and steel, a fortress built by his own hands. It was private, secure, and utterly us. There were no reporters, no society parasites. Only a handful of people who mattered. My father, who had finally looked at me with something beyond pride, with respect, Liz Chin, and a few of Lucas's most trusted allies. And one uninvited guest. I saw him as I walked down the aisle, which was not an aisle at all, but a path of dark slate through a grove of birch trees. Alastair. He stood at the very back, half hidden in the shadows, a spectre at my feast. He was thinner, his suit hanging loosely on his frame. He had come to watch just as I knew he would. To see the final chapter of a story he thought he was the author of. I didn't falter. My step didn't hesitate. I looked right through him as if he were made of glass, and fixed my eyes on the man waiting for me under the simple iron archway woven with ivy. Lucas Kane stood there, a storm contained in a black tuxedo. No tie. Top button undone. His hands were clasped loosely in front of him, and when his eyes met mine, the storm in them stilled, replaced by a look of such raw, unguarded awe that my breath caught. In that look I saw everything. The rivalry, the tension, the partnership, the passion, and the profound, quiet peace we had forged in the aftermath of our wars. I reached him and I took his hands myself. No one was giving me away. I was giving myself freely and completely. The officiant, a stoic judge who was a friend of Lucas's, began the traditional words. Lucas stopped him. "We'll use our own," he said, his voice carrying easily in the clear air. He reached into his pocket, pulled out a folded piece of paper, looked at it, and then with a small smile crumpled it in his fist. "None of that is enough," he said, his gaze locked on me. "I don't promise to be perfect. I'm too possessive, too cynical, and I work too much." A ripple of laughter went through the small crowd. "I don't promise to always be patient. Your stubbornness will likely drive me insane for the next 50 years. He took a step closer, his voice dropping, meant only for me. "I promise to never, ever be the man who asks you to be smaller. I promise to stand behind you when you lead, beside you when you fight, and in front of you if anyone ever tries to harm you again. I promise that your power will always be the thing I admire most about you." His voice cracked just slightly. "And I promise to spend every day of my life making sure you never have to go to war alone again." Tears, real and unbidden, welled in my eyes. They did not fall. It was my turn. I had written pages, but now they seemed superfluous. "I don't need saving. I began, my voice clear and strong. I never did. I need a partner who isn't afraid of the weapons I carry. I looked at our joined hands. You didn't try to calm my storms or dismiss my fires. You just stood in the rain with me until I was ready to come inside. I looked up, meeting his gray eyes, seeing my own reflection in them, whole, powerful, loved. You are the only man who never asked me to shrink. And in your arms, I have never felt more free. The judge, looking slightly bemused, said, well then, I suppose you may. Lucas didn't let him finish. His hands were in my hair, his mouth on mine, and the world disappeared. There was no applause, no sound at all, just the feeling of his kiss, a seal on a vow that had been written in boardrooms and in quiet offices, in rivalry and in rescue, long before this day had ever dawned. The reception was a riot of laughter, fine whiskey, and firelight. There was no garter toss, no first dance. There was just us, surrounded by our small, fierce tribe. Later, long after the guests had left, Lucas and I walked down to the edge of the property, where the lawns met the dark, whispering woods. I was barefoot, his tuxedo jacket draped over my shoulders. You really did it, he murmured, pulling me close against the night's chill. No, I said, leaning my head against his chest, listening to the steady, strong beat of his heart. We did. I looked back at the glowing glass house, a beacon in the darkness. I had been so many things: the betrayed fiancé, the whispered about heiress, the corporate assassin, the savior of her legacy. But today I was simply Isabella Thorncane. Partner. Victor. And as I turned back to my husband, to the man who had seen the battlefield in my soul and chosen to build a home there, I knew the greatest revenge of all was not in the taking, but in the building of a life so magnificent, the past no longer held any power. It was finally enough. The end.